The grand concourse of the imperial capital shimmered under the light of 3 artificial orbital suns. It was a spectacle of light and glass, a monument to the eternal stability of the Ethelgard Empire. Princess Seraphina walked the long crystalline promenade with the practiced grace of a woman who knew every camera in the hemisphere was trained on her silhouette. She wore a gown of woven heavy silk that shifted color from deep violet to royal blue with every step. A garment designed to look weightless but which felt like a suit of lead armor. The crowds cheering behind the energy barriers saw a beloved icon, the jewel of the court, a symbol of benevolence and peace. They screamed her name and threw bioluminescent petals that dissolved into sweet-smelling vapor before they could touch the pristine ground. Seraphina waved. She smiled the smile she had practiced in the mirror for 2 hours that morning, inside her mind. However, she was calculating exit vectors and analyzing the facial micro-expressions of the High Council members waiting for her at the end of the platform. She knew they underestimated her. To the High Council, she was a decorative object, a genetic masterpiece bred for diplomacy and breeding, not for governance. They saw the delicate bone structure and the wide, violet eyes and assumed the mind behind them was equally fragile. They were wrong. Seraphina reached the dais where Archminister Vane waited. Vane was a man whose face looked like it had been carved from cold tallow, pale and immovable. He represented the faction that favored a puppet ruler, someone they could control while they drained the outer colonies of their resources. Standing next to him was General Kalis, a man who wore his medals like a threat. Kalis wanted war. He believed the only way to unify the fracturing empire was to invent an enemy and crush it. Vane bowed low. The movement was precise, lacking any genuine warmth. "Your Highness," Vane said, his voice smooth as oil. "The people adore you. Your approval ratings are the highest in 3 centuries. Seraphina nodded, keeping her posture rigid. "The people are kind, Minister. But I did not come here to discuss my popularity. I came to discuss the reports from the frontier sector." Vane exchanged a quick, dismissive glance with General Kalis. "There is no need for you to worry your pretty head about the frontier," Kalis rumbled. "It is a matter for the military." "Actually, General," Seraphina said, her voice sharpening just enough to cut through his bluster, "I believe it is a matter of ecology. The reports indicate a collapse in the biosphere of the Western Reach. If the food systems fail, the rebellion you fear will not need a leader. Hunger will drive it." Vane stepped in, placing a paternal hand on the air near her shoulder, careful not to touch her. "That is exactly why we have arranged a new assignment for you, Highness. A diplomatic triumph. You are to travel to Xylos Prime." Seraphina froze. Xylos Prime was not a diplomatic hub. It was a death world. It was a remote planet on the jagged edge of the Empire, famous for 2 things. First, it possessed a biosphere of such aggressive lethality that colonists lived in shielded domes. Second, it was rumored to host ghost ecosystems, pockets of biological activity that defied all imperial scientific models. "Xylos Prime," she repeated. "That is a wildlife preserve. There is no government there to negotiate with. It is a symbolic gesture," Vane said, smiling with his teeth but not his eyes. "You will inaugurate the new planetary protection accords. It shows the galaxy that the Empire cares for even the wildest of its worlds. It will be a short trip, a few photo opportunities, a tour of the safe zones, and you will return a hero of conservation." Seraphina looked at them. She saw the trap immediately. They were sending her away. The succession vote was coming up in 2 weeks, if she was off-world. Stranded on a frontier planet under the guise of duty, She could not lobby the Senate. She could not speak to the wavering houses. She smiled, a cold expression that mirrored Vane. I serve the Empire. Minister, when do I leave? Within the hour, Vane said. 3 days later, the Imperial cruiser Aegis dropped out of hyperspace above Xylos Prime. The planet below was a swirling marble of violent greens and bruised purples. Even from orbit, it looked angry. Serafina sat in her private quarters, scrolling through a datapad she had decrypted during the long flight. She had not spent the journey sleeping. She had spent it digging. The official orders for her trip were standard, buried under layers of bureaucratic language about conservation and morale. But she had found discrepancies in the budget allocations. The security detail assigned to her was large, but the equipment manifest was wrong. They were packing crowd control weapons, not anti-megafauna heavy ordnance. It was as if someone expected her to be fighting rioters, not 10-ton apex predators. Furthermore, the communication relays for the sector were scheduled for maintenance starting tomorrow. She would be effectively cut off from the capital. This is not an exile, she whispered to the empty room. It is a disposal. The ship-to-surface shuttle ride was turbulent. The atmosphere of Xylos Prime was thick with moisture and storms. When the ramp lowered, the air that rushed in hit Serafina like a physical blow. It was hot, heavy, and smelled of wet earth, ozone, and something copper-like, similar to the scent of old blood. She stepped out onto the landing pad of Outpost 4. It was a rugged concrete slab surrounded by high-voltage fences that hummed with a menacing pitch. Beyond the fences, the jungle rose like a wall, a tangle of massive, dark vegetation that seemed to be watching the intruders. A small group of locals waited to greet her. They were not the silk-clad courtiers of the capital. These people wore scarred armor, utility vests stained with grease and chlorophyll, and expressions of weary patience. The man in front bowed awkwardly. Highness, I am Station Commander Holloway. Welcome to Xylos. We were not expecting royalty this far out. Serafina activated her environmental field, a shimmer of energy that kept the humidity and insects at bay. The Empire reaches everywhere. Commander, I am here to see the work you do. Holloway looked nervous. He glanced at the terrifying wall of trees behind him. Right. Well, we have set up a tour, but I have to be honest. Highness, this is not a petting zoo. The fauna here is active. I have my own security, Serafina said, gesturing to the squad of 6 Imperial guards behind her. They were clad in pristine white armor that looked ridiculous against the mud and grime of the outpost. Holloway looked at the white armor and grimaced. With all due respect, Highness, those suits are bright enough to attract a sky eater from 10 kilometers away. And your blasters? They might annoy a ridgeback, but they will not stop one. You need a local guide, someone who knows the rhythm of the green. He turned and shouted over his shoulder. Hey, Apprentice, get up here. From the back of the group, a man stepped forward. He was leaning against a crate of supplies, chewing on a stalk of fibrous grass. He pushed himself off the crate with a lazy, fluid motion that suggested he had nowhere to be and no rush to get there. He was tall, but unlike the bulked-up soldiers of the guard, he was lean, built like a runner. His hair was a dark, unruly mess that looked like it had been cut with a knife in the dark. He wore a faded gray tunic, trousers with too many pockets, and boots that had been patched 3 different times. He walked up to the princess and stopped. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He just looked at her. His eyes were an unsettling shade of amber, clear and amused. This is the guide? Serafina asked, her voice cool. An apprentice? The man spat the piece of grass onto the concrete. The name is Kalen, he said. His voice was a low baritone, rough around the edges. And technically, I am a junior ecological monitor, grade 2. But Apprentice is shorter. Serafina waited for the honorific. It did not come. You are to lead the heir to the imperial throne through a Class 5 Deathworld. Kalen looked her up and down. He took in the shimmering energy field, the silk gown, and the pristine white guards. I am not leading you, he said. I am keeping you from getting eaten. There is a difference. Also, lose the energy shield. It hums at a frequency that mimics the mating call of a swamp stalker. Unless you want a 5-ton lizard trying to court you, turn it off. Serafina bristled. The shield protects me from pathogens. The shield makes you a beacon, Kalen countered. He turned to Holloway. Boss, if she keeps the disco lights on, I am staying in the bunker. Do as he says, Highness, Holloway said apologetically. He has a nose for these things. Serafina clenched her jaw. She tapped the control on her wrist, and the shimmering field vanished. The heat and humidity instantly assaulted her, making her skin prickle. Fine, she said. Lead the way, Apprentice. But if I suffer so much as an insect bite, you will answer to the High Admiral. Kalen grinned, a lopsided expression that was equal parts charming and infuriating. If you get an insect bite, Highness, count yourself lucky. It means the big things are not hungry. The first expedition began the next morning. The goal was a research station 20 kilometers into the deep jungle. Serafina had insisted on traveling in the heavy armored hover transports her team had brought, but Kalen had vetoed it. Engines scare the game, he had said. And when the game here gets scared, it does not run away. It attacks. We walk. So they walked. The jungle was a sensory overload. The trees were mile-high pillars of ironwood, their canopies so dense that the ground was in perpetual twilight. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the roots, casting eerie blue and orange shadows. The air was filled with clicks, whistles, and deep, vibrating thrums that Serafina felt in her chest rather than heard. She walked in the center of the formation. Her guards formed a tight perimeter, their rifles raised. Kalen walked at the front, 10 paces ahead of everyone else. He moved with a strange, rolling gait, stepping over roots and sliding under vines without breaking stride. He carried no rifle, only a long composite staff and a sidearm that looked like it belonged in a museum. Serafina moved up to walk just behind him. She wanted to gauge this man. He was too relaxed. It bothered her. Do you take anything seriously? Apprentice? She asked, and stepping over a puddle of glowing slime. Kalen glanced back. I take lunch seriously, and I take not dying seriously. Everything else is just noise. You are insolent, she noted. And you are loud, he replied. You walk like you own the ground. Here, the ground owns you. Step lighter. Roll your foot from heel to toe. I have been trained in the finest combat academies in the Corps, Serafina said. Kalen hacked through a vine with a knife he had produced from nowhere. Those academies teach you how to fight people. People are predictable. People have egos. Out here, nothing hates you. Nothing loves you. You are just calories. It is humbling. Serafina watched his back. He was annoying, yes, but she had to admit he moved with efficiency. He didn't waste energy. Every movement had a purpose. So, why are you only an apprentice? She asked. You seem to know the terrain. Politics, Kalen said, shrugging. I have a problem with authority. I tend to tell superior officers when they are being stupid. It stalls career advancement. I can imagine, she said dryly. They walked in silence for another hour. The jungle grew denser. The sounds of the insects faded. replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. Serafina noticed the change immediately. It felt like the air had tightened. "Stop," she said. Her head of security, a man named Captain Drax, looked at her. "Highness?" "Something is wrong," Serafina said. "It is too quiet." Kalen had already stopped. He was standing perfectly still, his head cocked to the side. He was not looking at the trees, he was looking at the ground. "Captain," Serafina said. "Scans." Drax checked his wrist sensor. "Nothing on thermal. Nothing on motion. We are clear. Highness, just local interference." "No," Kalen said softly. Before Serafina could ask what he meant, Kalen moved. It was not a run. It was an explosion of motion. He spun around, grabbed Serafina by the harness of her field pack, and threw her bodily behind the trunk of a massive ironwood tree. "Down!" he roared. In the same second, the jungle floor to their left erupted. It was not an animal that charged them. It was the forest itself. A section of the undergrowth, indistinguishable from the ferns and moss, suddenly stood up. It was a camouflage predator, a titan chameleon, but the size of a siege tank. It possessed 6 legs ending in scythe-like claws and a jaw that unhinged to reveal rows of serrated bone. Drax and the guards were slow. They were looking at their sensors, not the world. The beast struck with a tongue that lashed out like a harpoon. It caught one of the guards in the chest, shattering his white armor like porcelain, and yanked him into the air. "Open fire!" Drax screamed. The guards unleashed a storm of plasma bolts. The blue energy splashed against the creature's hide, scorching it but failing to penetrate the thick, shifting scales. The beast roared, a sound that shattered the glass on Serafina's wrist computer. She scrambled to her feet, drawing her own sidearm, a sleek diplomatic pistol that felt like a toy against this monster. The creature turned its massive head toward her. Its eyes were independent turrets, swiveling to lock onto the royal purple of her dress. It hissed, crouching to spring. Kalen stepped between them. He did not raise his gun. He did not raise his staff. He simply stepped into the open, directly in the path of the lunge. He raised his left hand, palm open, fingers splayed in a specific, rigid pattern. Serafina screamed, "Get back!" Kalen ignored her. He made a sharp, guttural sound, a clicking noise deep in his throat that sounded unnatural for a human vocal cord. "K-k-k-ra." The titan chameleon froze in mid-spring. The massive beast loomed over him, saliva dripping from jaws that could snap a steel beam. It quivered. The independent eyes focused entirely on Kalen. For 3 agonizing seconds, the jungle held its breath. The guards had stopped firing, stunned by the suicide move. Kalen held his ground. He did not flinch. He repeated the sound, lower this time, more commanding. "Kutk." The creature let out a low whine, a sound of confusion and submission. It lowered its head. It did not strike. It took a hesitant step backward, its claws retracting slightly into the mud. Then, as if remembering it had left the stove on, the beast turned and vanished back into the dense foliage, its camouflage skin rippling to match the leaves instantly. It was gone. The silence that followed was louder than the roar. Serafina stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the spot where the monster had been, then at the back of the man standing in the clearing. Kalen lowered his hand slowly. He let out a long breath and rolled his shoulders. "Clear," he said casually. "Let us keep moving. We are behind schedule." Serafina marched up to him, grabbing his arm and spinning him around. "What was that?" Kalen blinked, looking genuinely innocent. "What was what?" "That thing," she hissed. "It was going to kill us. It stopped. You did something. You made a noise." Kalen shrugged. pulling his arm free. Just field luck. Highness, these big lizards are territorial. I stood my ground. It decided I was not worth the calories. Predator psychology. If the prey does not run, it might be poisonous. Do not lie to me. Apprentice, Serafina said, her voice shaking with adrenaline and anger. I saw it. It looked at you. It hesitated. It bowed. Kalen laughed, a dry, dusty sound. Bowed? It is a lizard, Highness. It does not know court protocol. It was just confused. Now, come on. We need to reach the ridge before nightfall. The nocturnal hunters are much less polite. He turned and walked away, tapping his staff against the roots as if he were on a Sunday stroll. Serafina watched him go. She looked at Captain Drax, who was checking the wounded guard. The guard was alive, bruised but lucky. Captain, she said quietly. Yes, Highness. Keep a recording of the apprentice. Every move he makes, every sound he utters. Drax nodded, looking at Kalen's retreating figure with suspicion. Understood. Serafina followed, her mind racing. She replayed the moment in her head, the precision. The way he knew the attack was coming before the sensors. The specific hand gesture, the sound, that was not luck. That was communication. She was not just dealing with a disrespectful guide. She was dealing with an anomaly. They made camp at dusk on a high ridge overlooking a valley of bioluminescent fog. The view was breathtaking, but Serafina was not interested in the scenery. She sat in her tent, the canvas flaps tied shut. She activated her datapad. The connection was weak, static-filled. But she had a backdoor channel she had established years ago, a narrow frequency used by smugglers. She initiated a scan of the local network traffic. She needed to know who this Kalen really was. The database search came back with a generic file. Kalen Vance, born, Outpost 9, education, standard, rank, junior monitor, notes, disciplinary issues regarding insubordination. It was too clean. It was a cover. As she stared at the screen, the scanner picked up a burst transmission. It was not coming from the capital. It was coming from the local communications array, beamed directly to the private receiver of Captain Drax. Serafina's fingers flew across the holographic interface. She was not a hacker by trade, but survival had taught her many skills that court etiquette forbade. She managed to intercept the packet before it auto-deleted. She decrypted the text, from Ministry of Interior Sector. Vane to Captain Drax Security Detail. Alpha Subject, Asset Liquidation. Message, proceed with Phase 2. The accident must occur tomorrow at the Gorge of Whispers. Ensure the target is separated from the guide. Structural failure of the bridge is the approved narrative. Public mourning protocols are already drafted. Make it look tragic. Make it look clean. Serafina stared at the words. The glow of the screen illuminated her pale face. Asset liquidation. They were going to kill her. Tomorrow. She looked up at the tent wall. Outside, she could hear the low murmur of the guards and the crackle of the campfire. Somewhere out there. Kalen was likely sleeping or keeping watch. She was alone on a world that wanted to eat her, surrounded by guards paid to kill her, with a guide who could talk to monsters but refused to tell her the truth. Serafina deactivated the pad and slipped a small vibro-blade dagger from her boot into her sleeve. She did not feel fear anymore. She felt a cold, crystalline clarity. Very well. Minister Vane, she thought. You want a tragedy? I will give you a show. She extinguished the light and waited for the dawn. The dawn on Xylos Prime did not break. It bruised. The sky turned a mottled purple, like a healing wound, and the jungle woke with a cacophony of shrieks that sounded uncomfortably like human screams. Serafina sat on a folding stool outside her tent, watching the perimeter. She held a cup of synthesized tea that tasted faintly of metal. Her eyes were fixed on Captain Drax. The security chief was standing near the communications array, speaking in hushed tones into his headset. Every few seconds, he glanced toward her tent, checking to see if the asset was still contained. She tapped her finger against the rim of her cup. She was not just observing, she was recording. A tiny microlens embedded in her brooch was capturing Drax's lip movements. She would run it through a decryption algorithm later, but she already knew the substance of the conversation. He was confirming the timeline for her death. "Good morning, Highness." Serafina did not jump, though her nerves were pulled as tight as piano wire. She turned to see Kalen leaning against a tree, whittling a piece of hardwood with a knife that looked sharp enough to shave with. "You move quietly for a man of your size, Apprentice," she said, taking a sip of the terrible tea. "And you sit very still for a woman who is terrified," Kalen replied. He blew wood shavings off the stick. "I am not terrified," Serafina lied. "I am contemplating the majesty of nature." Kalen snorted. He walked over and inspected her camp setup. She had laid out a small, portable table with a linen napkin, a silver spoon, and a nutrient bar arranged on a ceramic plate. It was a pocket of civilization in a sea of mud. "You are eating like you are at a garden party," he observed. "Civilization is a habit," Serafina said, lifting her chin. "If I abandon my standards simply because there are trees involved, then the chaos wins." Kalen reached out and tapped the silver spoon. It rang with a clear, bell-like tone. "That sound travels for 2 kilometers, he said. "There is a species of viper here that hunts by vibration, specifically high-frequency metal resonance. You are ringing a dinner bell." Serafina stared at the spoon. She slowly lowered it to the napkin. "Furthermore," he continued, grabbing her nutrient bar and breaking it in half, "you are sitting with your back to the wind. If something stalks you, you will not smell it until its teeth are in your neck. And this table? It is unstable. If you need to run, you will trip over it." He kicked a leg of the table, and the whole arrangement collapsed into the dirt. Serafina stood up, her face flushing. That was unnecessary. "Survival is rarely polite, Highness," Kalen said, handing her the half-broken bar. "Eat while walking, drink water, not tea. The caffeine accelerates your heart rate, which makes you bleed faster if you get tagged. And put some mud on that silk. You shine like a beacon." "I will not wear mud, Kalen." "Then you will be a very clean corpse," he said cheerfully. "Pack up. We move in 10 minutes. As they resumed the trek, the dynamic of the group shifted. Serafina found herself walking closer to Kalen, not out of trust, but out of necessity. Captain Drax and the guards stayed in a loose formation around them, their weapons raised, but their eyes were vacant, scanning sectors by rote. Kalen was different. He was constantly touching things. He ran his hands over moss, checked the underside of leaves, and tasted the air. "You treat them like they are thinking," Serafina said after 2 hours of silence. She stepped over a root system that pulsed with a faint blue light. "Who?" "The animals, the predators. You act as if they have an agenda." Kalen stopped and pointed to a cluster of trees to their left. The bark was stripped away in wide, jagged patterns. "See that? That is territory marking. But look at the height. 7 feet up. That is a ridge stalker. Now look at the ground." Serafina looked. The mud was undisturbed. "No tracks," she whispered. "Exactly," Kalen said. a flicker of approval in his eyes. It marked the tree but left no sign of its passage. It is not just claiming territory, it is setting a trap. It wants rivals to come investigate the scent so it can drop on them from the canopy. That is strategy, Serafina said. This whole planet is a strategy game. Highness, the biology here is not random mutation. It is a self-balancing equation. The predators do not just eat, they cull. They remove the weak, the sick, and the stupid. They maintain the equilibrium with a precision that makes your imperial senate look like a chaotic nursery school. Serafina looked at the dark canopy above them with new eyes. It is an intelligence, then? Kalen hesitated. His playful mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a deep, weary seriousness. It is a system. Call it a hive mind. Call it a ghost ecosystem. Call it God. But it watches, and right now, it is deciding if we fit. We are invaders, Serafina said. No, Kalen corrected. We are variables. The system does not hate invaders. It tests them. If you respect the rules, you survive. If you try to dominate it. He gestured to the guards in their white armor. The system corrects the error. By mid-afternoon, the terrain grew treacherous. They reached the edge of the Gorge of Whispers, a massive fissure in the planet's crust where the wind howled through jagged rock spires. A suspension bridge of woven kinetic cables stretched across the gap, swaying in the updraft. This is the crossing, Drax announced, stepping forward. His voice was tight. We cross one at a time. Safety protocols. Serafina looked at the bridge. It looked sturdy enough, but her stomach churned. This was the place. The message had said Gorge of Whispers. I will go first, Kalen said, stepping onto the cable. No, Drax barked. The guide stays rear guard. The princess crosses first. We need to secure the far side. Kalen narrowed his eyes. That is tactically unsound, Captain. If there is an ambush on the other side, she walks into it alone. Those are my orders, Drax said, his hand resting on his sidearm. Do not interfere. Apprentice. Serafina stepped forward before the argument could escalate. It is fine. Kalen. I will cross. She caught Kalen's eye. She tried to project a message with her gaze. Be ready. She stepped onto the bridge. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Below, the gorge dropped away into a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow the light. She walked steadily, counting her steps. 1, 2, 10, 20. She reached the midpoint. Suddenly, a sharp metallic snap echoed through the gorge. The kinetic emitter on her waist, the device meant to stabilize her center of gravity, shrieked. Instead of steadying her, it flared with a burst of reverse polarity. It was a sabotage malfunction. The force violently yanked her sideways, throwing her over the safety rail. She screamed, her hands scrabbling for purchase on the slick cables. She caught a lower support wire, her body dangling over the abyss. The emitter on her waist was still firing, dragging her down like a heavy stone. Help! She cried out, the wind tearing the word from her throat. On the ledge, Drax stood motionless. He tapped his headset, feigning a malfunction report. Malfunction. The winch is jammed, I cannot retract. It was a lie. He was waiting for her grip to fail. Then, a blur of motion tore past him. Kalen did not run to the bridge, he vaulted over the edge of the cliff. He dropped 20 feet, catching a vine that hung from the underside of the rock face. He swung like a pendulum, his body arcing out over the void. He let go of the vine at the apex of the swing. For a second, he was flying, untethered, a speck of gray against the massive chasm. He collided with the bridge structure 10 feet below Serafina, slamming into the support cables with a bone-jarring impact. He did not pause to recover. He scrambled up the swaying wires with the speed of an arachnid. He reached her just as her fingers were slipping. "Let go of the harness," he roared over the wind. "I can't," she screamed. "It's locked." He pulled a knife, not the whittling knife, but a jagged, dark blade he had pulled from his boot. He did not try to unlock the mechanism. He slashed the reinforced straps of her expensive Imperial survival suit. The heavy emitter fell away, tumbling into the dark, freed from the weight. Serafina gasped, but her strength was gone. She began to slide. Kalen's hand shot out. He caught her wrist. His grip was iron. There was no shaking, no hesitation. He held her entire weight with one arm, his feet hooked into the cables. "Look at me," he commanded. Serafina looked up. His face was inches from hers. The amber eyes were blazing. "I have you," he said. "Do you hear me? I have you." He hauled her up, pulling her onto the main walkway of the bridge. But he did not stop there. He grabbed her by the waist and sprinted for the far side, moving low and fast. As they hit the solid ground on the other side, a plasma bolt scorched the rock where they had just been standing. "Sniper!" Kalen yelled. He shoved Serafina behind a boulder and unslung the old projectile rifle from his back. He didn't use the scope. He peered around the rock, calculated the trajectory, and fired 3 rapid shots back across the gorge, aiming not at the guards, but at a cluster of unstable rocks above the bridge anchor. The rocks shattered. An avalanche of shale poured down, severing the bridge cables. The bridge whipped away, snapping back toward the other side and cutting off the pursuit. Silence returned to the gorge, save for the heavy breathing of 2 people huddled behind a rock. Serafina stared at him. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt. That was not the work of an apprentice. That was special operations. Kalen was checking his gear, his hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. He ignored the comment. "Are you hurt?" he asked roughly. "No," she said. "Good. Because we are now officially being hunted." Drax missed his chance. He will not try an accident again. Next time, it will be a direct assault. He turned to adjust his pack, and for a moment, the sleeve of his tunic rode up. Serafina saw it. Burned into the leather of his wrist bracer was a faint, hexagonal symbol. It was almost worn away, but the pattern was unmistakable. It was a stylized eye with a vertical pupil, bisected by a lightning bolt. She grabbed his wrist. Kalen froze. "Project Ether," she whispered. "The Xenological Warfare Division. My father disbanded that unit 15 years ago. They were accused of trying to weaponize planetary consciousness." Kalen looked at her hand on his wrist, then he looked at her face. The humor was gone entirely. "Disbanded is a polite word for purged, Highness," he said softly. "You are one of them," she said. "You are not a guide, you are a ghost." "I was a researcher," Kalen said, pulling his arm back. "We were not trying to weaponize it. We were trying to understand it. The military high command wanted monsters they could drop on rebel worlds. We wanted to prove that intelligence takes many forms. When they didn't get their monsters, they burned the program. I survived." "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You should hate my family." Kalen looked at her, and his expression softened into something complicated, pain mixed with reluctance. "Because you are the only person in that capital who voted against the Strip Mining Act last year," he said. "And because today, on the bridge, you didn't scream for your guards. You screamed for help. You are not just a symbol. Serafina, you are alive. I want to keep it that way." The intimacy of the moment hung between them, heavy and electric. They were alone, cut off from the world. hunted by their own people. "We need to move," he said, breaking the spell. "Night is coming." That night, they camped in a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. The roar of the water masked their heat signatures and their voices. They sat close together for warmth. The fire was a small, smokeless chemical puck that gave off barely any light. Serafina watched Kalen clean his rifle. The barriers of rank and protocol had been stripped away by the sheer proximity of death. "You saved me," she said quietly. "Thank you." He didn't look up. "It is the job. It is not the job of an apprentice to fight an Imperial Guard captain," she countered. Kalen stopped cleaning. He looked at her. The firelight danced in his amber eyes. "Do not romanticize this, Serafina. We are in a hole in the ground. Tomorrow, Drax will bring the gunships." "I am not romanticizing it," she said. She reached out and touched his hand, the one that had held her over the abyss. His skin was rough, calloused, and warm. "I am acknowledging it. In the palace, everyone touches me with gloves on. They touch the title, not the woman. You grabbed me. You saw me." Kalen stared at her hand on his. He turned his hand over, intertwining his fingers with hers. The contact sent a shock through Serafina that had nothing to do with the cold. He leaned in closer. She could smell rain and wood smoke on him. Her breath hitched. She saw his gaze drop to her lips, then flick back to her eyes. The longing was there, raw and undeniable. She leaned in, closing the distance. Then, he stopped. He pulled his hand away and sat back, putting a foot of cold stone between them. "No," he said hoarsely. Serafina blinked, hurt flashing across her face. "Why?" "Because you are vulnerable," Kalen said, his voice hard. "You are scared. You are pumped full of adrenaline, and you are clinging to the first thing that kept you safe. That is not affection, Highness. That is a survival response. I know my own mind. Kalen, do you?" He stood up, pacing the small confines of the cave. "Desire is a weapon. Serafina, in your world, people use it to get close to power. In my world, people use it to forget they are dying. I will not use you for either." "Stop treating me like a fragile symbol," she snapped, standing up to face him. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she felt tall. "I am not a porcelain doll that you need to put back on a shelf when this is over. I am the one who decrypted Drax's orders. I am the one who realized this was a trap. I am a woman. Kalen, if I want to kiss the man who saved my life, that is my choice. Do not dare protect me from myself." Kalen stared at her, stunned by the fire in her voice. He opened his mouth to reply, but a sound from outside cut him off. It was a low, mechanical thrumming, not a ship, something ground-based. He extinguished the light instantly. "Stay here." He moved to the mouth of the cave. Serafina followed him, ignoring his order. They looked out through the veil of water. Below them, in the valley basin, lights were moving. They were not searchlights. They were red, pulsing strobes arranged in a grid pattern. "That is not a search party," Kalen whispered. They crept down the rock face, moving silently until they reached the edge of the clearing. What they saw stopped them cold. It was a field lab. But it was not a research station, it was a deployment zone. Massive sonic emitters were spiked into the ground, pulsing with a low-frequency wave that made Serafina's teeth ache. Around the emitters, cages were stacked. Inside the cages were predators, raptor wolves, spine cats, creatures that should have been miles apart. They were thrashing against the bars, eyes rolling in madness, driven into a frenzy by the sonic waves. Look at the markings on the crates, Serafina whispered. Kalen raised his binoculars. Imperial logistics. Sector 7. Sector 7 is military supply, Serafina said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. They are not just killing me. They are destabilizing the migration routes. They are driving the predators mad, Kalen said grimly. If they turn these emitters up, every apex predator within 500 miles will surge toward the nearest settlement. It will be a slaughter. And then, Serafina finished, the Empire will have no choice but to send in the fleet. They will occupy the planet to save the colonists. General Kalis gets his war. The resources are seized. And my death is just the tragic footnote that justified it all. She looked at the horrific scenes. This was not just a conspiracy against a princess. It was a conspiracy against a world. We have to go, Kalen said. We need to get to the extraction point, and if you survive, you can testify. No, Serafina said. Kalen looked at her. What? If I leave, they will cover this up. They will blame the slaughter on a natural anomaly. They will burn this lab and claim they arrived too late. She turned to him, her eyes hard and brilliant. I am not leaving, Kalen. I am staying. You will die, he said. Maybe, she said. But I will not let them turn this world into a battlefield. We need proof, hard proof. We need to record the signal frequency and trace the command codes. Kalen looked at the stubborn set of her jaw. He looked at the chaos in the valley below. A slow, reluctant smile spread across his face. You are crazy, he said. I am learning, she replied. Kalen unslung his rifle. All right, Highness. Then we are not running. We are hunting. He checked the charge on his weapon. But if we do this, he added, glancing at her sideways, we do it my way. No protocols. No mercy. Serafina pulled her dagger from her boot. She tested the edge against her thumb. A drop of royal blood welled up, dark and real. Led the way. Apprentice. The sky above the outpost did not look like a rescue mission. It looked like an occupation. Serafina watched from the ridgeline, her optical binoculars pressed to her eyes. 3 massive Imperial frigates descended through the cloud layer, their hulls scorching the atmosphere. They were painted with the white and blue stripes of the Humanitarian Relief Corps, but Serafina knew the silhouette of a Titan-class siege carrier when she saw one. They are heavy, Kalen said, lying prone beside her in the mud. Look at the landing struts. Reinforced hydraulics. Those ships are not carrying grain and medical supplies. They are carrying tanks. Serafina lowered the binoculars. It is a rehearsal. They are testing the deployment speed for a full-scale invasion, disguised as emergency aid for the ecological crisis they manufactured. She felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. The scale of the betrayal was growing by the hour. It was not just about removing a troublesome princess anymore. It was about seizing a planet. We need allies, she said. We cannot fight a siege carrier with a hunting rifle and a vibroblade. Kalen slid backward down the slope, moving with the liquid grace that still unnerved her. I know a guy, he said. He is loud, he is annoying, and he is technically a criminal. But he has the only transmitter on the planet that can punch through the Imperial jamming frequency. The Resistance, as it turned out, was headquartered in a decommissioned sewage treatment facility buried beneath the roots of the great mangrove forest. The air smelled faintly of ozone and recycled water, but the space was dry and filled with the hum of stolen server banks. Serafina stood in the center of the room, looking at the motley crew Kalen had assembled. There was Commander Holloway, looking grim and cleaning a heavy repeater cannon. There was Dr. Aris, the station's chief xenobiologist, a woman with wild gray hair and ink-stained fingers who was currently pacing back and forth muttering about migration algorithms. And then there was Rollo. Rollo was the underground broadcaster. He was a small man with nervous energy who wore a headset that seemed permanently fused to his skull. He was currently live, speaking into a microphone that hung from the ceiling by a piece of duct tape. "Citizens of the frontier," Rollo shouted, his voice cracking with theatrical panic. "Do not eat the blue rations," I repeat. "The blue rations are 60% sawdust and 40% sadness. Stick to the local root vegetables." He slapped a switch, cutting the feed, and spun around in his chair to face Serafina. "Your Highness, what an honor." I would bow, but my back is killing me. And also, I am technically wanted for sedition against your grandmother. Serafina stepped forward, her muddy boots clicking on the metal grate. "You are the voice of the free frequency. I am the voice of sanity in a madhouse," Rollo corrected. "Kalen says you want to expose a minister. Which one? Is it Vane?" "It is Vane, isn't it? That man has a face like a wet slap." "It is Vane," Serafina confirmed. "But we need more than jokes. Rollo, we need to broadcast evidence. We found the supply manifest for the sonic emitters, but we need the financial trail. We need to prove the money came from the Imperial Treasury." Dr. Eris stopped pacing. "The central data hub for the sector is in the Obsidian Spire," she said. "It is an old terraforming tower about 50 miles north. If Vane is routing funds, the transaction logs will be cached there before they are beamed off-world. 50 miles. Holloway grunted, through the storm canyons and the luminous forest. "That is suicide. It is the only way," Kalen said. He was leaning against a wall of monitors, his arms crossed. "The Empire has locked down the airspace. We have to go on foot." Serafina looked at the map projected on the wall. The route cut through the most hostile terrain on the planet. "We go," she said. The journey into the storm canyons felt less like travel and more like an assault on the senses. The canyons were narrow fissures in the rock where the wind reached speeds of 200 miles per hour. The sound was a constant, deafening roar, a physical pressure that vibrated in the teeth and bones. They moved in a single file. Kalen took the lead, followed by Serafina, then Holloway, with Rollo bringing up the rear, clutching a portable transmission unit like a baby. The wind here was not just air, it was sonic. The geological geometry of the canyon turned the gusts into focused sound waves that could rupture eardrums or cause hallucinations. Kalen stopped suddenly. He held up a hand. Serafina watched him. He pulled down his protective cowl and closed his eyes. He turned his head slowly, exposing his ears to the lethal cacophony. It was madness, yet he looked peaceful. He began to hum. It was a low, resonant tone, barely audible under the wind, but Serafina felt it in the soles of her feet. "What is he doing?" Rollo shouted over the gale. "Is he singing?" "He is echolocating, Dr. Eris yelled back. "He is finding the harmonic null zone." Kalen opened his eyes and pointed to a narrow, jagged path leading up the left wall. "This way," he shouted. "The wind shear is about to collapse the main trail." They scrambled up the rocks. Seconds after they cleared the lower path, a blast of compressed air slammed into the canyon floor with the force of a bomb, pulverizing the stone where they had been standing. Serafina stared at Kalen's back. He wasn't just reading the wind, he was listening to the planet's breath. They emerged from the canyons into the luminous forest just as night fell. If the canyons were hell, this was a deceptive paradise. Every leaf, every vine, every patch of moss glowed with bioluminescence. The forest was a kaleidoscope of neon blues, toxic pinks, and radioactive greens. "It is beautiful," Serafina whispered, reaching out to touch a hanging vine that pulsed with a soft, golden light. Do not touch that. Kalen's hand shot out, intercepting hers inches from the plant. He didn't grab her roughly. He caught her hand with a firm, protective grip. That is a nerve lash, he said softly. It looks pretty, but the neurotoxin on those leaves will stop your heart in 3 minutes. Serafina pulled her hand back, but he didn't let go immediately. He held her gaze. You have to look past the surface. Serafina, he said, on this world, beauty is usually a warning. He turned his attention to the vine. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small nutrient pellet. He crumbled it gently near the roots of the deadly plant. What are you doing? She asked. Feeding it, he said. It is hungry. That is why it is glowing so bright. When it is fed, it dims. See? As the nutrients hit the soil, the golden light of the vine faded to a sleepy, dull orange. Kalen patted the deadly plant as if it were a pet dog. It is not malicious, he murmured. It is just trying to survive, like us. Serafina watched him. She saw the gentleness in his hands, the way he respected the lethality of the life around him without fearing it. He was a killer when he needed to be. Yes, she had seen him drop the bridge, but this was something else. This was empathy. They set up a temporary camp in a clearing of giant non-toxic mushrooms. Holloway and Rollo took the first watch, giving Serafina and Kalen a rare moment of privacy near the small heating unit. Serafina sat on a mossy stone, cleaning the mud from her boots. Kalen was checking the charge on his rifle, his movements rhythmic and precise. You are not an apprentice, Serafina said. It was not a question. Kalen paused. We have been over this. I am a junior monitor, grade 2. No, she said. A junior monitor reads sensors. You read the wind. You talk to lizards. You feed poison vines. You have a connection to this place that defies your rank. Kalen sighed and set the rifle down. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes made him look younger, less like a warrior and more like a man carrying a burden too heavy for his shoulders. I listen, he said. That is all. Most people come here and try to shout over the noise. They try to impose their order on the chaos. I just shut up and listen to what the chaos wants. And what does the chaos want? She asked. Balance, he said. It wants to breathe. He looked at her then. Really looked at her, stripping away the layers of princess and politician. You are getting good at it too, he noted. In the canyon, you moved before I signaled. You felt the pressure drop. I was terrified, she admitted. Fear is good. Fear keeps you sharp. It is panic that kills you. Serafina laughed, a short, breathless sound. You have a lecture for everything, don't you? Is that part of the survival guide? Rule 42, do not panic. Rule 42 is actually check your boots for scorpions, Kalen said, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. But yes, the banter felt easy, a warm current in the cold night. Serafina felt a sudden, fierce affection for him. He was so steadfast, so annoyingly competent, and so carefully distant. She reached out and placed her hand over his, stopping his fingers from fiddling with the weapon. Kalen, she said. He went still. He looked at her hand, his skin dark and scarred against her pale, smooth fingers. He didn't pull away this time. We are going to stop them, she said. I know, he replied. His voice dropped an octave, becoming rougher. But stopping them might cost us everything. I do not care about the cost, she said. I do, he said, the air between them charged with static. It was the same pull she had felt in the cave, but stronger now. It was the ache of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, wanting to jump but knowing the fall would shatter them. Kalen turned his hand over and squeezed hers. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, right over her pulse point. She knew he could feel how fast her heart was beating. Serafina, he whispered. Her name sounded like a prayer in his mouth. She leaned in. He met her halfway. Their foreheads touched, a point of contact that felt more intimate than a kiss. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of rain and ozone. For a moment, there was no empire, no war, no conspiracy, just the heat of his skin and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Then, the radio on Kalen's belt crackled. "Contact!" Holloway's voice hissed. "North quadrant. Movement." The moment shattered. Kalen pulled back instantly, the soldier replacing the man in the blink of an eye. He grabbed his rifle and stood up, his face hardening into a mask of focus. "Stay close to me," he ordered. Serafina stood, swallowing the lump in her throat. She picked up her data pad. Duty had returned, cold and demanding. The obsidian spire was a monolith of black glass piercing the canopy. They infiltrated the perimeter using Rollo's jamming device to create a blind spot in the automated turrets. Inside, the air was stale and cold. They fought their way to the server room, a short, brutal skirmish with a squad of automated sentry droids that Holloway dismantled with heavy explosive rounds. Dr. Eris plugged into the mainframe. "I am in," she said, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard, bypassing the firewalls. "Got it." She projected the data into the air. It was a stream of financial records. "There," Serafina said, pointing to a highlighted column. "Transfers from the Ministry of Interior, signed by Archminister Vane. They are paying the mercenaries through a shell corporation in the Outer Rim. This proves he is funding the destabilization." "Download it," Kalen said, watching the door. "We have company." Red lights began to flash. The facility's alarm screamed. "We need to move," Holloway yelled. They ran for the exit, but the courtyard was already swarming. A spotlight blinded them from above. An Imperial dropship hovered over the spire, its engines roaring. "Surrender!" A voice boomed from the ship's loudspeakers. "Throw down your weapons! We are pinned!" Rollo shrieked, ducking behind a statue of a long-dead colonial governor. Serafina looked at the tactical situation. They were surrounded by 30 elite shock troopers. There was no way out. She made a decision. She stood up, walking out from behind cover. "No!" Kalen shouted, reaching for her. She pushed him back. "Hide the drive!" she hissed. "Get the data to the broadcaster. They want me. If I surrender, they might hesitate long enough for you to escape." She raised her hands. "I am Princess Serafina of House Ethelgard," she shouted. "I surrender." Two troopers rushed forward, grabbing her arms. They dragged her toward a command tent that had been rapidly erected on the edge of the clearing. Inside the tent, a man was waiting. It was not Vane. It was a severe-looking operative in a gray suit, Agent Kress, the minister's cleaner. Kress smiled thinly. "Highness, you have caused us a great deal of trouble. I have the evidence." "Kress," Serafina said, keeping her voice steady. "Vane is finished. Vane is the future," Kress corrected. "And so are you. Or rather, your statement is..." He pushed a datapad toward her. It contained a script. "You will read this live on the emergency broadcast," Kress said. "You will state that the ecological collapse is natural and that you have requested immediate military intervention to save the populace. You will beg General Kalis to land his troops. And if I refuse..." Kress tapped a control on his wrist. A holographic screen opened, showing the courtyard outside. Holloway, Rollo, Dr. Eris. and Kalen were kneeling on the ground, execution style, with troopers holding blasters to their heads. "Then your friends die," Cress said. "And then we kill you anyway and use a deep-fake AI to broadcast the message. It is your choice. Do you want to die with dignity, or do you want to die screaming?" Serafina looked at the screen. She saw Kalen. He was not looking at the gun pointed at his head. He was looking at the ground. He was vibrating. No, she realized. He was humming again. She looked at Cress. "I need a moment," she said, "to prepare my voice." "You have 10 seconds, Cress said. Outside, the ground began to tremble. It started as a low vibration, shaking the dust off the statues. Then it grew. The trees around the courtyard began to shake violently. "What is that?" Cress asked, looking around. "Seismic activity?" On the screen, Serafina saw Kalen lift his head. He looked straight at the camera, straight at her, and winked. Then the jungle exploded. It was not an explosion of fire. It was an explosion of life. The perimeter walls of the compound buckled and collapsed as a herd of Titan behemoths smashed through the concrete. These were 6-legged herbivores the size of office buildings, usually docile, but right now, they were stampeding. Panic erupted in the courtyard. The shock troopers turned their weapons on the massive beasts, but their blaster fire was like throwing pebbles at a moving mountain. The behemoths did not crush the prisoners. They parted around them like water around a stone. Behind the behemoths came the hunters. Packs of razor wolves flowed through the breach, moving in a synchronized blur of teeth and claws. They tackled the troopers, dragging them down, disarming them with surgical precision. Cress drew his weapon. Serafina slammed her elbow into his nose. He staggered back, dropping the gun. She kicked it away and ran for the tent flap. She burst out into the chaos. The courtyard was a war zone of nature versus technology. The Empire was losing. She saw Kalen. He was standing in the center of the storm. He had stood up. The troopers guarding him had fled. A massive creature, a shadow stalker, the apex predator of the continent, a beast of pure muscle and night-black fur, leaped from the roof of the spire. It landed directly in front of Kalen. Serafina screamed, "Kalen!" The beast roared, a sound that shook the fillings in Serafina's teeth. It turned its massive head toward the remaining Imperial soldiers. It did not attack Kalen. It stepped in front of him, shielding him with its body. Other predators joined it. 3 razor wolves and a pair of venom kites landed in a circle around him, facing outward. They snarled at the troopers, their hackles raised. They were not hunting him. They were protecting him. Kalen stood in the center of the ring, calm and untouched. He raised his hand, pointing toward the breach in the wall. "Go," he said. The word was not shouted, but it carried across the battlefield. The animals surged forward, driving the Imperial forces back, forcing them to retreat to their dropships. Serafina ran to him. She scrambled over the rubble, dodging a fleeing trooper. She reached the protective circle of monsters. The shadow stalker turned its head to look at her. Its yellow eyes narrowed. It hissed. "Down," Kalen said softly. "She is with me." The beast instantly closed its mouth and stepped aside, allowing Serafina to pass. She stopped in front of him. She was breathless, covered in dust, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She looked at the circle of apex predators guarding him like royal sentries. She looked at the way he stood, not as a victim of the chaos, but as its conductor. "You," she whispered. Kalen looked at her. There was no humor in his eyes now, only a deep resignation. "We have the data," he said. "We need to go before air support arrives." He reached out to take her arm, and for the first time, Serafina flinched. She looked at his hand, then at the monster standing obediently at his heel. You are not just a researcher, she said, her voice trembling. You are not just a monitor. I am what I need to be, Kaylin said. No. She stepped back, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. The way they move for you, the way they listen. You didn't just study the hive mind, Kaylin. You are part of it. Kaylin didn't deny it. He didn't offer a witty deflection. He just looked at her with an expression of profound sadness. We can discuss my resume later. Highness, right now, we have a revolution to start. He whistled, a sharp, piercing sound. The shadow stalker lowered its back, offering a ride. Get on, Kaylin said. Serafina looked at the beast, then at the man she had almost kissed by the fire. She realized she didn't know him at all. She was standing next to a power that could topple empires, a secret that could burn worlds. She climbed onto the beast. As they thundered out of the compound, leaving the burning ruins of the Imperial presence behind them. Serafina watched Kaylin's back. He rode the lead wolf, guiding the pack with silent commands. He was not an apprentice. He was a king in a kingdom she was only just beginning to understand, and she was terrified that his crown might be made of treason. The safe house was a hollowed-out cavern beneath the root system of a petrified ironwood tree. It smelled of damp earth, ozone, and the metallic tang of adrenaline that had not yet faded. Outside, the jungle rain hammered against the ground with the force of small stones, a relentless drumming that drowned out the distant sirens of the Imperial search parties. Serafina stood in the center of the cramped space, her royal gown torn at the hem and stained with the mud of the escape. She was not shivering from the cold, but from a fury that felt hot enough to burn the air. She watched Kaylin. He was sitting on a crate near the entrance, stripping off his tactical vest. His movements were stiff, guarded. The shadow stalker that had carried them to safety was gone, dissolved back into the green shadows at a single silent command from him. Tell me, she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the trembling fear she had felt an hour ago. Kaylin did not look up. He unbuckled a strap, his fingers moving with mechanical precision. We are safe for now, Highness. The rain masks our thermal signature. Stop it, Serafina snapped. She crossed the small room in 2 strides and kicked the crate he was sitting on. It barely moved, but the violence of the action forced him to look at her. Stop managing me. Stop treating me like a package you are delivering. You commanded a pack of apex predators to attack an Imperial battalion. You spoke to them. They bowed to you. She leaned down, her face inches from his. I want the truth, Kaylin. Not the Apprentice cover story, not the guide persona. The truth. Kaylin held her gaze. The amber of his eyes seemed to swirl, shifting in the dim light. He looked exhausted, the lines of his face drawn tight by a lifetime of looking over his shoulder. He dropped the vest to the floor. It was called Project Symbiosis, he said, his voice rasping. It was a subdivision of the Intelligence Directorate. 10 years ago, the Empire realized that terraforming was too expensive. It was cheaper to adapt the soldiers to the planet than the planet to the soldiers. Serafina straightened, her mind racing. Xenological adaptation? That is illegal under the Galactic Charter. The Empire views the Charter as a suggestion, not a law, Kaylin said dryly. He tapped the side of his head, just above his left ear. They didn't just train us. They surgically altered the temporal lobe. They grafted neural tissue from the hive mothers, the queens of the predator hierarchies, into our cerebral cortex. Serafina covered her mouth, horror washing over her. They put alien tissue in your brain. They wanted a bridge, he continued, looking at his hands. They wanted officers who could issue commands that the local biosphere would obey as biological imperatives. We were supposed to be the ultimate crowd control. Why waste ammo when you can order a swarm of venom wasps to pacify a riot? He let out a short, bitter laugh. It worked, too well. The connection wasn't just a one-way radio. We felt them. We felt the ecosystem. And when you feel the pain of a forest being burned for a landing strip, you stop being a good soldier. You defected, Serafina whispered. I ran, Kalen corrected. There were 12 of us in the Alpha class. The other 11 went mad. The sensory overload burned them out. I was the only one who could compartmentalize the noise. When I realized they were going to dissect me to find out why I survived, I destroyed the lab and vanished. I came here to the edge of the map, hoping to live quietly as a ghost. He looked up at her, and the vulnerability in his expression broke her heart. Instead, I got a princess. And now, because I used the command frequency to save you, every listening post in the sector knows I am alive. The hunt that is coming for us is not just for you, Serafina. They want their weapon back. Serafina looked at him. She saw the monster the Empire had tried to build, but she also saw the man who had refused to be one. She saw the lonely, terrifying burden he carried, a mind constantly flooded by the raw, violent consciousness of a death world, yet still capable of gentleness. She sank to her knees in front of him, heedless of the dirt. You are not a weapon, she said fiercely. Kalen looked away, his jaw tightening. You saw what happened at the outpost. I pointed a finger, and men died. They were going to execute us, she said. She reached out, taking his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You saved us. You saved my friends. He closed his eyes, leaning slightly into her touch, as if her cool palms were the only quiet thing in a loud universe. You do not understand. Serafina, when I open that door, when I let the connection in, it is hard to close it. It feels good. It feels like power. I am afraid that one day, I will not want to come back to being human. I will pull you back, she promised. Kalen opened his eyes. The intensity of his gaze pinned her to the spot. It was not the look of a subordinate. It was the look of a man who was starving for something he knew he shouldn't have. And who will pull you back, Highness? He asked softly. You are trained to be a symbol. You are trained to be the perfect reflection of what everyone else wants. Who are you when the cameras are off? The question hung in the damp air. Serafina felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent her life performing. Her smile was a tool of statecraft. Her marriage was a bargaining chip. Her existence was a public asset. I do not know, she admitted, her voice shaking. I have never been allowed to choose. My father told me who to marry. The council told me what to say, even my rebellion. I worry it is just another role I am playing because I think it is what a hero would do. She looked at him, stripping away her own defenses. But when I am with you, when we are running, or fighting, or arguing, I do not feel like a princess. I feel like Serafina, and that terrifies me more than the monsters. Kalen reached up, his hand covering hers on his cheek. His thumb brushed her skin, a rough, warm caress. Good, he whispered. Be terrified. It means you are awake. He leaned in. The distance between them closed to nothing. Serafina could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell the rain and the wildness. She parted her lips, her breath hitching. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted to burn the protocols and the politics and just be a woman claiming what she wanted. Kalen hesitated. His eyes searched hers, filled with a protective jealousy and a desperate, aching restraint. He wanted to take her. She could see it, but he pulled back, just an inch. "Not here," he said, his voice thick with regret. "Not while you are still a target. I will not be another thing that happens to you. Serafina, when this is done, if we survive, you choose. You choose me, or you choose the throne, but you do it with a clear head." Serafina nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She respected him for stopping, even as she hated the space he put between them. "We will survive," she said, standing up and pulling him to his feet, "because we are going to finish this." The plan was madness, born of desperation and the strategic improvisation that Kalen thrived on. Rollo, speaking through a static-filled frequency from a mobile emitter, laid out the logistics. "The Unity broadcast is in 12 hours. Rollo's voice crackled. "It is the Emperor's annual address to the frontier colonies. Every screen, every holopad, every public terminal on Xylos Prime is hardwired to carry the signal. If we can hijack that feed, we can broadcast the financial records and the footage of the false flag operation directly to the people." "Where is the uplink?" Serafina asked, hovering over the holographic map Kalen had projected onto the cavern floor. "That is the bad news," Rollo said. "The primary relay is inside the Chimera research facility." Kalen swore softly. "Chimera. That is the militarized zone. It is where they built the Predator control tech." Serafina realized. "It is fitting. We end it where it started." They moved out at dusk. The rain had stopped, leaving the jungle steaming in the twilight. They approached the Chimera facility from the southern ridge, a sheer cliff face that the security protocols deemed unclimbable. They climbed it. Kalen moved with unnatural ease, finding handholds in the rock that Serafina couldn't even see. He hauled her up the difficult sections, his strength limitless. By the time they reached the ventilation intake on the roof of the facility, Serafina's muscles were burning, but her mind was razor-sharp. Kalen disabled the sensors with a localized sonic pulse from a modified device Rollo had built. They slipped into the vents, crawling through the metal intestines of the fortress. The facility was cold, sterile, and white. It was the antithesis of the vibrant, deadly world outside. They dropped into a server corridor, moving silently across the polished floors. Serafina hacked the door panel. Her hands were steady. She was not playing a role now. She was an operative. "We are close," she whispered. "The central broadcast hub is 2 levels down." They encountered a patrol near the elevators. Kalen didn't use his gun. He moved like a blur, striking with open palm blows that targeted nerve clusters. The guards dropped without a sound. He dragged them into a supply closet. "I try not to kill the grunts," he murmured as he wiped his hands. "They are just following orders." Serafina looked at him. "Mercy is a risk. Cruelty is a habit," he countered. "Come on." They reached the central hub. It was a massive circular room filled with banks of servers and a central holographic projector that was currently cycling through the pre-broadcast tests. Serafina rushed to the console. She plugged in the drive containing the data they had stolen from the Obsidian Spire. The financial trails, the orders for the Predator baiting, and the video of Cress admitting the plot. "I am bypassing the encryption," she said, her fingers flying. 2 minutes to upload. Kalen stood at the door, his rifle raised. He was tense, his head cocked to the side. "Something is wrong," he said. "It is too quiet. There should be more guards." "Maybe they are watching the perimeter," Serafina suggested. "No," Kalen said. He turned to her, his eyes widening. "It is a trap." As if on cue, the blast doors slammed shut, sealing them in the room. The holographic projector flickered and changed. Instead of the broadcast test pattern, The face of Archminister Vane appeared. He was sitting in his office in the capital, light years away, looking bored. "Princess," Vane said, his voice amplified by the room's speakers. "And the rogue asset, I must say, you are persistent. Most people would have died in the gorge. You are finished." "Vane!" Serafina shouted, not stopping the upload. "The galaxy is about to see what you did." "Are they?" Vane smiled. "Or are they about to see a tragic, mentally unstable princess who has been brainwashed by an eco-terrorist cult? We have been spinning the narrative for hours. My dear, the news reports are already calling you a victim of Stockholm Syndrome. The upload bar hit 90%. Deploy the asset." Vane ordered to someone off-screen. The ventilation grates in the ceiling blew open. It wasn't soldiers that dropped in. It was a pair of genetically modified cyborg hounds. They were unrecognizable as animals, wired with metal, their eyes glowing red with cybernetic rage, their natural instincts burned out and replaced with kill codes. Kalen shoved Serafina behind the server bank. "Stay down!" He stepped into the open. He didn't raise his rifle. He raised his hand, making the clicking sound of the hierarchy command. The hounds didn't stop. They didn't bow. They shrieked, a sound of mechanical torture, and lunged. "They are lobotomized," Kalen yelled. "They can't hear me." He raised his rifle and fired. The first hound took a round to the chest but kept coming, its metal claws skittering on the floor. It slammed into Kalen, knocking him back. Serafina screamed. She pulled her pistol and fired wildly, hitting the hound in the flank. It turned on her, its jaws snapping. Kalen scrambled up, abandoning his rifle. He drew his vibro knife and tackled the beast from behind. He drove the blade into the neural linkage at the base of its skull. The machine animal convulsed and died. But the second hound was already there. It leaped for Serafina. Kalen threw himself between them. There was a sickening tear of fabric and flesh. The hound's claws raked across Kalen's side, shredding his tunic and carving deep into his ribs. He grunted, a sound of pure agony, but he didn't fall. He grabbed the hound by the throat with his bare hand and slammed it into the server rack. With a roar of effort, he ripped the cybernetic implant from the creature's neck. It collapsed. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the hiss of sparks from the damaged servers. Kalen stood swaying, his hand pressed to his side. Blood, dark and alarming, seeped between his fingers. "Kalen!" Serafina rushed to him, catching him as his knees buckled. "I am fine," he wheezed, his face gray. Did the upload finish?" Serafina looked at the screen. "Upload complete." "Yes." She sobbed. "We did it." Suddenly, the facility alarms blared. "Security breach. Purge protocol initiated." "We have to move," Kalen said, trying to stand and failing. Serafina grabbed his arm, draping it over her shoulders. She was smaller than him, but fear gave her strength. She half dragged, half carried him toward the emergency maintenance hatch she had spotted on the schematics. They didn't go back up. They went down. Down into the waste chutes that dumped into the river below the facility. They slid into the darkness just as the blast doors blew open and the room filled with laser fire. They washed up on a muddy bank 3 miles downstream. The river had carried them deep into the uncontrolled zone, away from the facility but into the heart of the predator territory. Serafina found a small rock shelter, a depression in the cliff face protected by hanging roots. She dragged Kalen inside. He was shivering violently now, the water and the blood loss taking their toll. She activated the small emergency light on her wrist. The wound on his side was ugly. 3 deep lacerations. "I need to cauterize this," she said, her voice shaking. "Do it," Kalen whispered through grit teeth. She used the heat element from their survival pack. The smell of searing flesh filled the small space. Kalen arched his back, a guttural cry escaping his throat, his hand gripping her wrist so hard she thought the bone might snap. But he didn't pull away. When it was done, he slumped back against the stone, breathing in shallow gasps. Serafina worked quickly, bandaging him with strips torn from her underskirt. She cleaned the blood from his skin with water from her canteen. Her hands moved over his chest, feeling the hard muscle and the scars of a life spent fighting. She laid her hand on his heart. It was beating slow and strong, a rhythmic thud against her palm. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "You jumped in front of it." "Because," he murmured, his eyes half closed, "you are the future. I am just the past." "No," she said firmly. She lay down beside him on the cold stone, sharing her body heat. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. "You are not the past. You are the only thing in this world that makes sense." In the quiet dark, with the rain falling outside and the distant roars of the night hunters echoing in the canyon, the barriers finally broke. Kalen turned his head. His forehead rested against hers. The fever from the wound made his skin hot. "Serafina," he breathed. She kissed him. It was not the tentative, fearful moment from the cave. It was a claiming. She kissed him with all the fear and the anger and the love that had been building since the moment he saved her on the bridge. She tasted the blood in his mouth and the salt of her own tears. He kissed her back, weak but desperate, his hand tangling in her wet hair. For a minute, they were not a princess and a rebel. They were just two people keeping the dark at bay. When they broke apart, Kalen rested his head on her shoulder. His breathing evened out as exhaustion took him. Serafina lay awake, staring at the rock ceiling. She realized then that she had fallen in love. Not the courtly love of poems, but a visceral, bloody, terrifying love. She loved him not because he protected her, but because he saw her. He saw the strength she tried to hide. She checked her data pad. She needed to know if the broadcast had worked. She pulled up the public feed. Her heart stopped. The screen showed her face, a distorted, grainy image of her shouting in the server room. The audio was warped. "Destroy the Empire. Burn it all down." The voice was hers, but the words were spliced. It was a fake. The news anchor's voice cut in, grave and serious. Shocking footage confirmed. Princess Serafina, suffering from acute psychological trauma, has aligned herself with the radical eco-terrorist faction known as the Green Wake. The attack on the conservation center caused critical damage to the planetary protection grid. The screen shifted to show Kalen's face, a mugshot from his military file. The princess is believed to be under the influence of this man, Kalen Vance, a disgraced former soldier classified as a Tier 1 threat. Citizens are advised to remain indoors. Martial law has been declared. Serafina dropped the data pad. It landed in the mud. "They cut the feed," she whispered. "They spun it." She looked at Kalen, sleeping fitfully beside her. They had lost. They had played their ace, and Vane had trumped it. Now, every soldier, every bounty hunter, and every terrified colonist on the planet would be looking for them. The radio crackled. It was Rollo. "Highness, are you there?" She picked up the earpiece. "I am here." "It is bad," Rollo said, his voice unusually small. "They blocked the data packets. Only the fragments got out, and they are twisting them. And, Highness, General Kalis has landed. The siege carriers are deploying ground troops." "Where do we go?" she asked. "We cannot go back to the outpost. There is only one place," Rollo said. "The deep sanctuary, the forbidden zone." "That is suicide," Serafina said. No human has ever returned from the deep sanctuary. It is the heart of the hive mind. It is that or the firing squad, Rollo said. And Highness? Run. Serafina deactivated the radio. She looked out at the jungle. It was pitch black, alive with the sounds of things that hunted in the dark. She shook Kalen awake. Kalen, she said softly, we have to move. He opened his eyes, wincing as he sat up. Did it work? No, she said, helping him stand. She didn't sugarcoat it. She gave him the respect of the truth. They framed us. Kalis is here. We are alone. Kalen looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw the steel. He nodded slowly. Where are we going? To the deep sanctuary, she said. Kalen froze. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw true fear in his face. Not for himself, but for what lay ahead. The sanctuary is not just a forest. Serafina, it is the source, the connection there. It will be deafening. It might break my mind. Then I will hold it together for you, she said. She took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. You led me through the dark. Now I will lead you. They stepped out into the night, leaving the shelter behind. Ahead of them lay the deepest, oldest part of the planet, a place where the apex predators were not just animals, but guardians of a secret that had been waiting 1,000,000 years to be told. They walked into the black, hand in hand, two fugitives against an empire. The deep sanctuary was not a forest. It was a cathedral built of biology and time. The trees here were so old they had calcified into living stone, their leaves vast canopies of translucent silver that filtered the moonlight into a spectral haze. The air did not smell of rot or mud, but of ozone and crushed starlight, a sharp, electric scent that made the hair on Serafina's arms stand up. She walked beside Kalen, her hand hovering near his waist to steady him. He was moving with a grim determination, favoring his injured side, but his eyes were wide and alert. The fever had broken, replaced by a hyper-aware lucidity that Serafina found unsettling. They are watching us, she whispered. She could feel it. 1,000,000 eyes in the dark, not the hungry, predatory stares of the outer jungle, but a heavy, judging weight. They are always watching, Kalen said, his voice hushed. But here, they are also listening. This is the neural hub of the planet. The roots of these trees connect to the fungal mycelium networks that span the entire continent. If you drop a stone here, a wolf in the northern tundra hears it hit the ground. Serafina looked around. The shadows seemed to breathe. You said this place was dangerous, she said. It is, Kalen replied, but not because it wants to eat you. It is dangerous because it judges you. If you bring aggression here, the sanctuary reflects it back tenfold. If you bring fear, it terrifies you. The Empire calls it a death zone because every soldier they sent in here died screaming at their own hallucinations. And what are we bringing? She asked. Kalen stopped. He leaned against the silver bark of a massive tree. We are bringing the truth, and we are bringing a request for asylum. He closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath. Serafina watched as the lines of pain on his face smoothed out. He was not just resting, he was connecting. The faint, rhythmic thrumming that permeated the air seemed to sync with his breathing. Then, the bushes to their right rustled. Serafina drew her pistol instantly. Put it away, Kalen ordered, without opening his eyes. But, put it away, Serafina. If you aim a weapon here, you are declaring war on a god. She hesitated, then slowly holstered the gun. The bushes parted. It was not a monster. It was Holloway, followed by Dr. Aris, and a very muddy, very terrified Rollo. "Found you," Holloway grunted, lowering his heavy repeater cannon. He looked around the ghostly clearing with suspicion. "The tracking beacon you gave us led us right through a nest of sleeping vipers. They didn't bite. It was unnatural." "It is perfectly natural," Kalen said, opening his eyes. "You didn't step on them, so they didn't bite you." Mutual respect. Rollo was scraping mud off his headset. "Respect. I almost stepped on a tail the size of a landing strut. This place is a nightmare. Can we please go back to the sewage plant? It smelled better." "We cannot go back," Serafina said, stepping forward to greet them. "General Kalis has landed his elite strike team. They are sweeping the grid. This is the only place their sensors cannot penetrate." Dr. Aris was staring at a patch of glowing moss, her scanner beeping wildly. "This is incredible," she muttered. "The bioelectric readings are off the chart. It is not just a network. It is a consciousness, a distributed intelligence. The predators. They are not individual hunters here. They are white blood cells in a planetary immune system." "Exactly," Kalen said. He pushed himself off the tree. "And that is why the Empire wants to burn it. They cannot conquer an enemy they cannot intimidate. They want to break the cycle of balance and replace it with a hierarchy of fear." He looked at the group. "Listen to me carefully. We are safe here for now. But Kalis will not stop at the perimeter. He will burn his way in if he has to. When they arrive, you must do exactly what I say." "What do you mean?" Rollo asked nervously. "I mean the rules of engagement have changed," Kalen said. "If you see a creature with blue markings, do not make eye contact. If you smell cinnamon, walk backwards slowly. And if a Titan class comes into the clearing, bow. Bow." Holloway scoffed. "To an animal? If you want to keep your head attached to your shoulders, yes." Kalen said deadpan. "It is a sign of submission to the hierarchy. It tells them you are not a challenger." "This is ridiculous," Holloway muttered. "I am a decorated officer of the Ranger Corps. I do not bow to lizards." 10 minutes later, Holloway was bowing to a lizard. It was a small creature, no bigger than a house cat, but it had scales like obsidian and eyes that burned with a frightening intelligence. It stood on a rock, hissing at the ranger until he awkwardly lowered his head. The creature chirped, satisfied, and scampered away. "See?" Kalen said, sitting on a log and checking his bandages. "It is just etiquette." Serafina sat beside him. She watched him manage the ragtag group with a mix of exasperation and affection. He was teaching them how to survive, not by fighting, but by understanding. "You are not their master, are you?" she asked quietly. Kalen shook his head. "No. The Empire thought they could make me a beast master, a king of monsters. But that is not how nature works. There are no kings here. There are only contributors. Then what are you?" "I am a mediator," he said. "I am a translator. I speak the language of equilibrium. The ecosystem tolerates me because I ask for permission before I take. I am the voice that says, 'We are not a threat.'" Serafina looked at him. She saw the humility in his posture. He had the power to kill a squad of soldiers with a gesture, yet he viewed himself as a guest in his own home. That is leadership, she realized. It was not about standing on top of the pyramid. It was about holding the pyramid together. The peace of the sanctuary was shattered an hour later. A thunderous boom echoed through the silver trees. Smoke began to drift through the canopy, acrid chemical smoke. "They are here," Holloway said, racking the slide of his cannon. Kalen stood up, wincing as his side pulled. "They are using incendiaries. They are burning the forest to clear a line of sight." Serafina checked her data pad. Rollo, can you get a signal out? Rollo adjusted his headset. The interference is massive. Highness, the bioelectricity here scrambles the feed. But if I boost the gain, yes, I can get a localized burst. But I need line of sight to the orbital relay. We need to go to the clearing, Kalen said. The Ancestors' Ring. It is a natural amphitheater about 200 meters north. They moved quickly. The sounds of the jungle changed. The rhythmic thrumming turned into a low, angry vibration. The sanctuary was waking up. They burst into the Ancestors' Ring. It was a vast circle of flattened stone, surrounded by trees that towered hundreds of feet into the air. In the center of the ring was a pool of water so clear it looked invisible. Through the trees on the far side, the enemy emerged. It was not a standard patrol. It was the Death Squad, 20 soldiers in heavy black power armor, carrying flamethrowers and high-yield plasma rifles. Leading them was a man Serafina recognized from the court files, Commander Vok, General Kailas's personal executioner. Vok stopped when he saw them. He lifted his visor. He smiled, a cruel expression that promised pain. End of the line. Princess, Vok shouted. His voice was amplified by his helmet speakers. Serafina stepped forward. She did not draw her weapon. She stood tall, her torn dress flowing around her like a banner of war. You are trespassing on sovereign ground. Commander, she announced. Her voice was steady, trained in the grand halls of the capital. Vok laughed. Sovereign ground. It is a forest, Highness, and we are here to weed it. He gestured to his men. Burn it all. Make it look like a wildfire trapped them. No witnesses. Rollo was crouching behind a rock, his camera live. I have the feed, Highness. The galaxy is watching, Vok sneered. Let them watch. They will see a tragic accident. The soldiers raised their flamethrowers. The pilot lights flickered, ready to unleash a torrent of liquid fire. Run. Serafina, Kalen said softly. He stepped up beside her. Get behind me. No, Serafina said. She looked at him. She saw the fear for her safety in his eyes, but she also saw the resolve. She reached out and took his hand. I am not running. Kalen, I am done running. If they want to kill me, let them do it while I am standing on my own 2 feet. I will not let my existence be used to justify their war. Kalen looked at her. He squeezed her hand. Then, he let go. He stepped forward, placing himself between the princess and the flamethrowers. He was unarmed. He looked small against the wall of black armor. He closed his eyes. He did not scream. He did not shout a command. He simply spread his arms, palms open, fingers splayed in the specific geometry of the hierarchy. He let out a sound. It was not a human sound. It was a sub-vocal vibration, a resonance that shook the water in the pool and rattled the teeth of every person in the clearing. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting. K-thrum, Commander Vok hesitated. What is that? Kalen opened his eyes. They were not amber anymore. They were entirely black, dilated by the sheer volume of the neural connection he was channeling. I asked them for help, Kalen said, his voice overlapping with a dozen other harmonics. And they answered. From the shadows of the trees, they came. They did not charge. They did not roar. They flowed into the clearing with the silence of a rising tide. First came the razor wolves, 50 of them, forming a perfect phalanx on the left. Then the spine cats, slinking down from the branches to form the right flank. But then, the ground shook. From the deep darkness behind the pool, a shape emerged that blocked out the moon. It was a grand titan, a creature of legend, An apex predator the size of a dropship, covered in plates of iridescent armor. Its breath was a fog of cold mist. The Imperial soldiers lowered their flamethrowers, paralyzed by primal terror. Vok took a step back. "Fire!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Kill it!" The soldiers fumbled with their triggers. But the Titan did not attack. It walked toward Kalen. Its footsteps cracked the stone floor. It stopped 3 feet from him, its massive head hovering above him like a suspended boulder. It sniffed him, a sound like a jet engine intake. Serafina watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw Kalen standing there, a speck of human fragility against the monster. Kalen looked up at the Titan. He nodded, a small, respectful motion. "I see you." The Titan let out a low rumble. Then, slowly, majestically, the massive beast lowered its front legs. It dipped its colossal head until its snout touched the ground at Kalen's feet. It bowed. Behind it, the razor wolves lowered their heads. The spine cats crouched in submission, the entire lethal menagerie of Xylo's Prime, the most terrifying ecosystem in the galaxy, bent the knee. Serafina stared, the breath driven from her lungs. The princess believed he was only an apprentice until apex predators bowed. The thought rang through her mind with the clarity of a bell. He was not a beastmaster. He was not a king. He was something far more dangerous to the Empire. He was the acknowledged equal of the wild. Kalen turned to Vok. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. "Leave," he said. The word carried the weight of the Titan behind him. Vok looked at the bowing monsters. He looked at his shaking soldiers. He looked at the live camera Rolo was pointing directly at his face. "Retreat!" Vok screamed. "Fall back!" The Imperial squad broke. Discipline collapsed into panic. They threw down their heavy fuel tanks and ran, scrambling back into the jungle, chased by the terrified beating of their own hearts. The predators did not pursue. They held the line, a wall of living biological weapons, disciplined and absolute. Silence returned to the ancestors' ring. Kalen swayed. The blackness faded from his eyes, replaced by the familiar amber, but dull and exhausted. He collapsed. Kalen. Serafina caught him before he hit the stone. She lowered him gently, cradling his head in her lap. Holloway and Dr. Aris rushed forward. Rolo kept the camera rolling, capturing the image of the princess holding the fallen eco-warrior surrounded by bowing monsters. "Is he breathing?" Serafina demanded, her hands frantic on his chest. Dr. Aris scanned him. "It is neural shock. The connection required too much energy. He is drained." Kalen's eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Serafina. He offered a weak, lopsided smile. Did they leave?" he rasped. "They ran," Serafina said, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "You made them run. I didn't make them do anything," Kalen whispered. "I just asked the landlords to evict the trespassers." Serafina laughed, a sound that was half sob. "You are an idiot. You could have died. Calculated risk," he mumbled. She leaned down. She didn't care about the cameras and she didn't care about the protocol. She gathered him into her arms, pulling him close, burying her face in his neck. It was a raw, desperate embrace, a release of all the terror and the awe she had carried. Kalen's hand came up to grip her arm, anchoring himself to her. For a long moment, they stayed like that, surrounded by the silent giants of the forest. The romantic tension that had been simmering between them boiled over into something profound. A shared survival, a bond forged in fire. Serafina pulled back slightly. Her face was inches from his. She looked at his lips. "Kalen," she whispered. He looked at her, and the desire was there, naked and intense. He lifted his hand to touch her face. "Highness," Rollo shouted, shattering the moment. "Look at the feed!" Serafina froze. She looked up. Rollo was holding the monitor toward them. The screen showed the imperial capital. Crowds were gathering in the streets. The video of the Boeing Predators was playing on the massive public screens. The narrative of the mad princess had shattered. People were not seeing a terrorist. They were seeing a miracle. The Empire lied. The text crawl on the bottom of the screen read, "Princess Serafina defends the frontier." Rollo grinned. The propaganda machine just broke a gear. "Highness, the entire sector is watching. They are waiting for a statement." Serafina looked down at Kalen. He nodded slowly. "Go," he whispered. "Finish it." Serafina stood up. She smoothed her torn dress. She wiped the tears and the dirt from her face. She stepped over to Rollo and looked directly into the camera lens. She did not look like the porcelain doll of the court anymore. She looked like a queen of the old blood, forged in iron and storm. "Citizens of the Empire," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "What you saw today was not magic. It was nature rejecting tyranny. The attack on Xylos Prime was not an accident. It was a coup orchestrated by Archminister Vane and General Kalis to justify a war for profit." She pointed to the Titan still waiting silently in the background. "We were told that this world was a threat. We were told that we needed to conquer it to be safe. That is a lie. The only threat to this empire is the greed of those who rule it." She paused, letting the weight of her words land. "I am returning to the capital," she declared. "I am bringing the evidence. I am bringing the truth. And I am coming to take back my throne, not as a puppet, but as a protector of all life within our borders." She signaled Rollo to cut the feed. The screen went dark. Holloway let out a low whistle. "Well, that is going to cause a stir." "We need a ship," Serafina said, turning to him. "We have Vox dropship," Kalen said, his voice stronger now as Dr. Eris administered a stimulant. He left it at the clearing edge when he ran. Serafina walked back to Kalen. She offered him her hand. "Can you stand, Apprentice?" she asked, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Kalen took her hand. He let her pull him up. He stood close to her, swaying slightly but steady. "I can stand if you are holding me, Highness," he said. "Then I will not let go," she promised. She looked at the Titan one last time. She bowed her head to the creature, a gesture of thanks. The Titan huffed a cloud of mist and turned, disappearing back into the deep woods. Serafina turned her face toward the sky, toward the distant stars where the capital waited. "Let us go home. Kalen, I have some conspirators to arrest." "And," Kalen added, picking up his rifle, "I believe I have a date with the tribunal." Serafina looked at him, her eyes fierce. "Let them try," she said. They walked out of the sanctuary together, leaving the safety of the trees for the danger of the court, ready to burn the corruption out of the heart of the empire. The arrival of the stolen Imperial dropship Valkyrie at the capital was not the subtle, diplomatic entry the flight controllers had requested. It was a statement. The vessel, scarred by plasma fire and streaked with the atmospheric burns of a high-velocity entry, bypassed the private royal hangars entirely. Instead, Serafina ordered Holloway to set it down in the center of the Plaza of Ascendance, a massive public square paved with white marble and surrounded by the glittering spires of the High Ministry. The engines screamed as the ship descended, scattering a flock of ornamental doves and forcing the gathered crowd of thousands to shield their eyes. These were not the carefully curated crowds of her departure. These were the masses, citizens who had watched the pirated broadcast from the frontier, people who had seen a princess standing amidst monsters. defying the very generals who claimed to protect them. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. Serafina stepped out first. She had refused to change out of her torn, mud-stained gown. She wore the grime of Xylo's prime like a coronation robe. At her right hand walked Kalen, his face stoic, his uniform stripped of rank insignia, carrying nothing but the weight of his own history. Behind them came Holloway, Dr. Eris, and Rollo, the latter filming everything with a frantic, vindictive glee. A hush fell over the plaza. Then, a single voice cried out from the back, followed by another. It was a roar of approval, a wave of noise that crashed against the pristine glass of the government buildings. "They are cheering," Kalen murmured, scanning the rooftops for snipers. "That complicates things for the snipers." "It buys us time," Serafina replied, keeping her head high. "But the real war is inside." They were met at the base of the ramp not by friends, but by the Imperial Guard. However, the guards did not draw their weapons. The optics of arresting a returning hero in front of a cheering mob were too dangerous, even for Archminister Vane. Instead, a protocol officer stepped forward, looking at Serafina's muddy boots with undisguised horror. "Your Highness," he said, his voice trembling. "The High Council is in emergency session. They await your explanation." "Lead the way," Serafina said. The council chamber was a circular amphitheater designed to intimidate. The seats of the ministers floated on anti-gravity discs, positioned high above the central podium, forcing anyone who addressed them to look up like a petitioner. Serafina walked to the center of the room. Kalen stayed 2 paces behind her, a shadow in the bright lights. Archminister Vane sat at the highest tier, flanked by General Kalis. Vane looked calm, but his fingers were drumming a silent rhythm on his armrest. "Princess Serafina," Vane began, his voice amplified to fill the room. "We are relieved to see you alive. We were concerned that your abduction by this radical element had left you permanently damaged." He gestured to Kalen. "We have specialists ready to deprogram you." "Highness," Vane continued, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. "We know how charismatic these eco-cultists can be. It is a tragedy. A lonely young woman, burdened by duty, seduced by a rugged extremist who whispered pretty lies about nature. It is a scandal, yes, but one we can forgive." Serafina laughed. It was not a polite, courtly laugh. It was a sharp, genuine sound that cut through the tension. "You want to frame this as a romance?" "Minister?" she asked, stepping up to the microphone. "You want to reduce the survival of a planetary ecosystem to a tabloid headline about a girl with a crush?" She looked up at him, her violet eyes hard as diamonds. "He did not seduce me. Vane. He taught me. He taught me that a leader who cannot feel the pain of their people or their planet is not a ruler. They are a parasite." General Kalis leaned forward, his medals clinking. "Mind your tongue, girl. You are speaking to the architects of the Empire. We have evidence that this man, this apprentice, used illegal neural tech to stage the attack. He is a puppet master." "And I have evidence," Serafina countered, pulling a data crystal from her sash, "that you paid for the stage." She slotted the crystal into the podium's interface. The massive holographic screen surrounding the chamber flickered to life. The data they had stolen from the obsidian spire flooded the room. Financial transfers, communication logs, the signed order from Kalis authorizing the deployment of sonic agitators to drive the predators mad. The murmur in the room turned into a gasp. The lower ministers, those not part of the inner circle, whispered furiously to one another. "This is a fabrication," Kalis roared. "Standing up." "Is it?" Serafina asked. "Look at the timestamp. General, That transfer was authorized 3 days before I even arrived on Xylos. You were not reacting to a crisis. You were buying it. You wanted a war because the border worlds are demanding independence, and you needed a common enemy to frighten them back into line. She turned to the cameras that were broadcasting the trial to the entire city. They tried to kill me, she said clearly. Not because I am a princess, but because I was a witness. Vane's face had lost its oily composure. He looked pale. He tapped a command on his console, cutting the audio feed to the outside world. But the screens inside the room remained active. You are a child playing with fire, Vane hissed. You speak of peace. You speak of balance. You have no idea what keeps this empire safe. It is fear, Seraphina. Fear keeps the systems running. Fear keeps the harvest ships on schedule. Without the iron fist, we starve. He looked at Kalis and nodded. If you love your monsters so much, Highness, Kalis said, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Let us see if you can control them here. Kalis pressed a red key on his desk. Sirens began to wail across the capital. A holographic map appeared in the center of the room. It showed the Imperial Menagerie, a research facility located just 3 miles from the Senate Hall. The containment fields were flashing red. What have you done? Seraphina whispered. We have a few specimens from Xylos Prime in captivity, Kalis said casually. For study, I have just lowered the containment barriers. 2 Titan-class predators and a pack of razor wolves are currently exiting the facility. They are confused, angry, and very hungry. He leaned back. If your pet whisperer is as good as you say, let him stop them. If he fails, the slaughter in the streets will prove that militarization is the only answer. The public will beg us to save them. Seraphina looked at Kalen. The blood had drained from Kalen's face. He wasn't looking at the general. He was looking at the map. They are frightened, Kalen said softly. I can feel them. They are in pain. The city noise, it is hurting them. You have to stop them, Seraphina said. I cannot reach them from here, Kalen said. The distance is too great for a direct neural link, and the city's interference is too high. Then use the grid, Seraphina said. She turned to the console. Rollo, are you on the line? Rollo's voice crackled in her earpiece. I am hacking the public address system now, Highness! But Vane is trying to lock me out. Override him, Seraphina shouted. Give the apprentice the microphone. She grabbed the collar of Kalen's tunic. Do not fight them, she said. Do not try to be a soldier. Be the mediator. Tell them they are safe. Kalen looked at her. He saw the absolute trust in her eyes. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes to shut out the glare of the council chamber. Put me on, he said. A screech of feedback echoed through the city as Rollo hijacked the emergency sirens. The wailing stopped, replaced by a heavy, breathing silence. Kalen leaned into the podium's microphone. He did not speak words. He made the sound. It was the low, resonant thrum of the hierarchy, amplified by the city's massive speakers. It rolled over the capital like a wave of thunder, vibrating the glass of the skyscrapers and shaking the dust from the marble streets. K-thrum, On the holographic map, the red dots representing the predators stopped moving. In the streets below, citizens froze. They looked up, terrified, as the massive shape of a Titan beast emerged from an alleyway. It was roaring, smashing a hover car with its tail. Then, the sound hit it. The Titan froze. It cocked its head. Kalen spoke then, his voice calm, layered with the strange harmonics of the biolink. Safe. Still. Wait, the commands were simple, primal. On the screens in the council chamber, the ministers watched in stunned silence. The Titan beast did not attack the fleeing civilians, and it sat down. It curled its tail around its legs, lowering its massive head to the pavement, waiting for instructions. The razor wolves, who had been tearing at a security fence, stopped. They lay down in the middle of the boulevard, panting, their aggression melting away into confusion. "They are not monsters," Kalen said, his voice echoing through the silent chamber and the silent city. "They are just lost. And they are waiting for someone to show them the way home." He opened his eyes and looked directly at General Kalis. "You tried to weaponize their fear, General. But you forgot that fear is temporary. Order is permanent." The chamber erupted, not with applause, but with shouting. The lower ministers were standing, pointing at Vane and Kalis, demanding answers. The evidence of the manufactured crisis, combined with the live proof that the threat was manageable without war, shattered the conspiracy's foundation. "Guards!" Serafina shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Imperial Guard captain, the one who had hesitated at the landing pad, stepped forward. He looked at Vane, then at Serafina. He looked at the data screens showing the treason. He drew his weapon. "General Kalis, Archminister Vane," the captain said grimly. "You are under arrest for high treason and ecological sabotage." As the guards moved in to seize the conspirators, Serafina didn't watch them fall. She turned to Kalen. He was leaning against the podium, trembling slightly from the effort of the broadcast. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "No," Kalen said, covering her hand with his. "We did it." The chaos of the aftermath took hours to settle. There were emergency sessions, press briefings, and the complex logistics of transporting the loose predators back to a containment ship without violence. It was late evening when Serafina finally found a moment of peace. She was in her private chambers in the east wing of the palace. The room was vast, filled with silk tapestries and ancient artifacts, a stark contrast to the caves and tents where she had spent the last week. She stood on the balcony, looking out at the city. The lights were back on. The panic had subsided. The door opened softly. Kalen walked in. He had been given fresh clothes, a simple black tunic and trousers, clean and sharp. He looked different without the mud and the blood. He looked handsome, yes, but also out of place. He looked like a wolf in a jewelry store. "They told me to wait in the hall," he said, closing the door behind him. "I told them I do not wait in halls anymore." Serafina turned. The wind caught her hair, blowing it across her face. "They are calling you a hero," she said. "The news feeds are saying you are the first true xenological ambassador. They are calling me a curiosity," Kalen corrected. He walked over to the balcony rail, standing a few feet away from her. He kept a respectful distance, the old habits of rank dying hard. "And what are they saying about you?" he asked. "They are saying I am dangerous," Serafina said with a faint smile. "They are saying I broke the rules. They are saying I cannot be controlled." "Good," Kalen said. "That means you are ready to rule." Serafina looked at him. The distance between them felt wrong. After everything, the bridge, the cave, the sanctuary, the polite space of the palace felt like a lie. "Stop standing there," she said quietly. Kalen looked at her. He hesitated, then took a step closer. "This is dangerous. Serafina, Vane is gone, but the court is still a shark tank. If I stay near you, they will use me to hurt you, and they will say the Empress is beholden to a rogue. I do not care what they say." She said. "I do," Kalen replied. His voice was rough. "I spent my life hiding. Serafina, I am used to the shadows. You belong in the light. I do not want to be the shadow that dims you." Serafina stepped forward, closing the gap. She reached out and took the lapels of his tunic, pulling him toward her. "You are not a shadow," she said, fierce and low. "You are the only person who saw me when I was invisible. You are the one who taught me that power isn't about sitting on a chair. It is about standing in front of the fire." She looked up into his amber eyes. "I am not choosing you because it is a thrill, Kalen. I am not choosing you because we survived a war. I am choosing you because I cannot imagine building a new world without you standing next to me." Kalen stared at her. The walls he had built around himself, the soldier's discipline, the outcast's cynicism, crumbled. He raised his hands, cupping her face with a tenderness that made her breath hitch. "I wanted to leave," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "When we landed, I wanted to disappear back into the crowd, to keep you safe from my reputation." "Why didn't you?" "Because," he said, his thumb stroking her cheekbone, "I looked at you walking into that tribunal, and I realized I would rather die at your side than live anywhere else." The air between them was electric, heavy with the memory of the near misses and the unsaid words. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. It was an intimacy deeper than skin. It was a surrender. Serafina closed her eyes, breathing him in. She wanted to kiss him, to lose herself in the heat of it. But the moment was too heavy for just physical release. This was a pact. "Stay," she whispered, "not as a guard, not as a guide, as my partner." Kalen pulled back just enough to look her in the eye. "As your partner," he vowed. He leaned in, his lips brushing the corner of her mouth, a promise, a tease, a seal on the contract, before he pulled away, straightening his spine. "But if we are going to do this, Highness," he said, his voice returning to its dry, confident rhythm, "we need to fix your security protocols. The guard rotation on the east wing is pathetic. I could have broken in here with a spoon." Serafina laughed, the sound bright and free. "Then you better get to work, Ambassador." The coronation hall was a sea of gold and scarlet. The entire nobility of the empire was gathered, 1,000 lords and ladies waiting to see if the rumors were true. The High Justice stood by the empty throne. He held the crown of Ethelgard, a heavy artifact of diamond and platinum. Serafina stood at the entrance. She was not wearing the traditional heavy robes of state that swallowed the wearer's form. She wore a sleek, armored gown of white and silver, a visual blend of royalty and readiness. The High Justice cleared his throat. "The Council has prepared the terms of ascension," he announced. "Her Highness will accept the guidance of the Regency Board until such time as—" Serafina stepped forward, her voice cut through the hall without a microphone. "There will be no Regency Board," she said. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. The High Justice blinked. "Your Highness, tradition dictates. Tradition gave us a conspiracy that nearly ate the frontier," Serafina said. "Tradition gave us a war for profit. I am rejecting the terms." She walked up the steps of the dais. "I offer new terms. The Outer Worlds will be granted seats on the High Council. The Ecological Oversight Committee will be given veto power over military expansion. And the Empire will sign the Treaty of Xylos, recognizing the sovereignty of sentient biospheres." The High Justice looked around nervously. "These are radical changes. The Council will not accept them. Then the Council can explain to the people why they prefer treason to reform," Serafina said coldly. She reached out and took the crown from his hands. She did not wait for him to place it on her head. She placed it there herself. "I am not asking for permission. Justice. I am informing you of the future." She turned to face the court. and I do not rule alone. She gestured to the side of the dais. Kalen stepped out from the shadows of the pillars. He wore a formal uniform, but it was unique, slate gray, with the emblem of the silver tree embroidered on the shoulder. He walked with the silent grace of a predator, his head high. He did not bow to the crowd. He walked up the steps of the dais and stood at her right hand. He was not seated on a throne, but he was standing on the royal tier, a position reserved only for consorts and conquerors. A gasp went through the nobility. A commoner? A defector? Standing on the imperial dais? Serafina looked at the crowd, daring them to object. "This is Lord Vance," she announced, "High Warden of the Ecological Distinct. He is the voice of the world we live on, and he has my full confidence." Kalen looked at the sea of shocked faces. He caught the eye of a general who looked like he was about to stroke out. Kalen winked. Serafina looked at him. He looked back. In that shared glance, there was a universe of understanding. They were two people who had walked through the fire and come out carrying the flame. The music swelled, a new anthem, bold and complex. Serafina stepped forward to the edge of the platform, Kalen matching her stride for stride. Below them, the Empire waited, balanced on the knife edge between the old rot and the new growth. It would be a hard road. There would be assassins and politics and resistance. But as Serafina looked out at the galaxy, she felt the warm, steady presence of the man beside her, and she felt the ghost hum of the distant jungle in her mind. She smiled. Let them bow, she thought, or let them run. We are ready.